Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to continue talking about chapter 5, and I'm going to talk about other senses that we have besides our sense of vision and our sense of hearing. I'm going to talk about our sense of touch, our sense of kinesthesia and balance, which has to do with our body position in space, how fast we're moving, and how that information kind of gets sent to the brain. And then I'll talk about our sense of smell and our sense of taste. So our sense of touch is really interesting. We have all sorts of skin receptors underneath our skin that determine different things like pressure. I can't say this word, but there's many different ones underneath the skin surface that detect pressure. There are also receptors that detect pain or potential harm. That's called nociception, and it sends that information directly to the brain. So if you've ever touched a hot stove and your hands flying off before you even realize what's happened, that's your skin sensing that there's danger and sending that information to your brain and causing you to pull your hand off the hot stove. There's also temperature receptors, so their information it gets sent to our brain about how cold or how hot something is. And the number of skin receptors corresponds with how sensitive that particular part of the body is. So we know like our fingertips are really sensitive, our face is really sensitive. So we have many more receptors underneath the skin in different parts of our body that are really sensitive to touch. And I would imagine that people are different in their sense of touch. We're pretty much the same in many ways. Like definitely our fingertips are more sensitive, and there are certain parts of our body that are more sensitive. But you know, there are some people who aren't ticklish, and then there are people that are super ticklish. So I'm sure that has to do with your sense of touch and how sensitive you are to touch, and that has to do with the number of skin receptors that you have. Now, our vestibular senses are located in our inner ear, and they tell us about our sense of balance, where we are in space. So this guy here, it kind of works. So there's a lot of fluid in our inner ear. When we looked at that cochlea and many of the other parts of the ear, it kind of works like a carpenter's level. That's why I put this picture on here. All the fluid is going to move to that side of your head if your head is tilted this way. And that fluid sends a message to your brain about where you are in space, where your head is in space. And that's our vestibular sense. Our kinesthetic sense tells us how not so much how fast we're going, but whether we're moving. And definitely it kind of interacts with the vestibular system to determine how fast we're moving and just where we are in space. So the kinesthetic sense, though, is located in the muscles and joints. So it tells our brain where our arms are, where our legs are, and what they're doing. When it interacts with the vestibular system, then it tells us how fast we're going and whether we're in balance and where our position is in space. So the kinesthetic sense is really important to movement. And proprioception is this sense of body position, which is important to send information to the brain about where our body is and where we are in space. So those are three senses that we don't think a whole lot about, but they're important to us. And I don't know that we study these a lot in psychology, but we wanted to mention that we do have those other senses. So the sense of smell and taste are a little bit more interesting. Olfaction is the fancy name for our sense of smell. There are receptors that are activated by chemicals that we smell and or taste, and that's why we call the sense of smell and the sense of taste a chemical sense. So there's molecules in whatever it is that we're smelling. If we're smelling chocolate chip cookies, there's chocolate chip molecules that get inhaled through our nose and attach to different receptors inside our nose and our olfactory bulb and send information to our brain about what we're smelling. We can actually detect 10,000 odors, which is hard to even imagine. How can you fit all those receptors in your nose? I don't know. And we definitely know, this is not surprising, that our sense of smell is tied to our sense of taste. If you've ever had a cold or a stuffed up nose, you know you can't taste anything, and that's because you need to be able to smell in order to be able to taste. also, our sense of smell, this is something people don't really think about, is strongly connected to our memories and to our emotions, and certain smells can trigger different memories and emotions. And that's where we're different as human beings, is that, the chocolate chip memories might bring up good memories for one person, maybe bad memories for another person. So that's why people respond differently to different smells. People also have different sensitivity to smells. Some people are much more sensitive to smells than others. And I don't know if there's been a lot of research on that. I wonder if people have more sensors, more receptors, and that's why they're more sensitive to smell. That would make a lot of sense to different smells, because some people are kind of oblivious to bad smells, and other people really can't get it out of there, can't stop smelling it. Although we think about that sensory adaptation too, we sort of get used to smells once we've been in a place for a bit. We get used to how that particular place smells, and it doesn't usually bother us anymore. But there are people who are super sensitive, and it does continue to bother them. So this is how transduction works in our olfactory system. So there's molecules in the air that they call odor molecules that get inhaled through our nose, and then there's receptor cells inside our nose, and those receptor cells take in that information, those molecules, and we believe that there are particular receptor cells for each different molecule smell, so like 10,000 different ones in there, and that information gets collected in the olfactory bulb, and then it's sent to the different parts of the brain from the olfactory nerve. Pretty complicated stuff just for smelling things. So what about our sense of taste? Do people have different tastes and different senses of taste? And of course we know the answer is of course. Some people love spicy food, and some people like really more bland type food. And why is that? Is that a physical thing, or is that a psychological thing? So we'll talk about that. And what about our sense of taste changing as we get older? Do little kids like different things versus adults? The answer is yes. So we have about 5,000 to 10,000 taste buds on the sides and the tip of our tongue. So this person here has a ton of taste buds on their tongue. This person is probably considered what we call a super taster. Which means they are very sensitive to taste, and they taste things very strongly, and it's because they have a lot of taste buds. If you wanted to do this test on yourself, I tried to look in the mirror at my tongue, and I could not see nearly the taste buds that this person has. But you can also take like a dark food coloring like green or blue and paint your tongue with a Q-tip and that food coloring, and then the taste buds will stand out as white, and then you can kind of tell. But you can tell that the range here, 5,000 to 10,000 taste buds, that's a pretty huge range, right? So everybody has a different number of taste buds, and everybody has a different level of sensitivity to taste. So it really is a physical thing. Some people are very sensitive to taste, and some people are not. People that are super sensitive to taste and really can taste things very intensely are what we call super tasters. There's a psychologist in England, couldn't get the video to upload, but who exclusively studies our taste sensation and studies that people that are really sensitive to taste. And she developed this chemical, and the average person can't even taste it. She puts it on a little piece of paper, and the person puts it in their mouth. And if you're a super taster, this chemical tastes really bitter and awful, but to other people it doesn't taste at all. So it really helped her to understand her theory that people definitely have different numbers of taste buds and a different level of sensitivity to flavors and taste. So molecules, this is another chemical sense, and so the molecules in the food actually connect with our taste buds to create that sense of taste. By age 20, this is kind of sad. You've lost half the taste receptors that you've had at birth. So what that means is little kids are very sensitive to taste because they have many more taste buds, and things taste much stronger to them. So they tend to be really picky eaters. So if you have kids and they're picky eaters, the reason is that it tastes bad to them, and they really intensely taste that food. Alcoholics have also been shown to have less response to bitter taste. which, somebody had mentioned in one of our discussions that, why do people even drink alcohol? It tastes so terrible. But to some people, it doesn't taste as terrible. And we also train ourselves to like different bitter foods. And there are some bitter foods that are good for us. Certain bitter vegetables are really good for us. But sometimes bitter also in the past, and definitely for animals, bitter a lot of times means that it's poisonous. So bitter is kind of one of those tricky taste sensations that we do have to be a little bit careful about. But people do. One reason why, like kids, are super sensitive to that taste of alcohol and they don't like it at all. It's because their taste buds are really strong. As we get older, we don't respond as much to that bitter taste, and it doesn't bother us as much. And then eventually we might even like the taste of alcohol. So there's 5 different taste sensations, which might be surprising to you because most of us know that there are 4. We know sweet, sour, bitter, and salty, right? But there is a new taste sensation called umami, and it's only added a few years back. It's a Japanese word, and what they're saying is that it's kind of a fatty, beef, brothy, salty sort of a flavor, and they don't feel like it's explained by any of the other taste sensations. So they felt like it was a really important taste sensation to add. So you want to remember those 5 taste sensations. We're most sensitive to bitter taste, and that probably is because it could be dangerous if we eat bitter things. But bitter lettuces, we eat that, bitter vegetables, and we're least sensitive to sweets. So I guess that's why we like to eat so many sweets. So that is it on the other senses, and we will have one more video after this.